I've been following Backyard Eats for years, and I love just seeing the bountiful, beautiful food producing spaces that you are creating while keeping clients engaged over a long period of time, which I'm super fascinated to talk about. We're going to talk more about how you built the company and just the kinds of edible landscaping work that Backyard Eats is doing. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thrilled to have you on. You've been a key voice and just supporter of the Foodscaper for years now, and it's overdue to have you on. So run us through the origin story of Backyard Eats and the services that you all are offering.
Sure. So the company was founded in 2016, not by me. I actually came on in 2020. So the founder, my partner, Chris Mattingly, he got laid off by his an engineering firm. He was like designing landfills and like a civil engineer, and got laid off and like pretty much started a garden by hobby. And kind of our like aha moment that sparked our mission, which is now to share the magic of homegrown food, was in his backyard garden. The story goes, he ate his first fresh blueberry and was just kind of like, why isn't anybody sharing this? Why is this a secret type of thing? And that kind of spurred him. He was a stay-at-home dad, so sort of like did it for the first few years where he could, and like built the core service, which we haven't really changed very much, which is the design, build, maintain, primarily like raised bed and annual spaces. We've worked in perennials over the years, but really like around his neighborhood in the suburbs of Philly, and started growing it. I was like the third employee, I think, in 2020. So I started right like first week of COVID. Chris was moving away, and he was moving back to Maryland, which he lives now. So Chris and I overlap for about 3 days geographically. So we've never actually worked together in the same location. So Chris was looking for somebody to keep the business going in 2020. I was sort of looking to transition into something like this. Like I had the seed of an idea to start something like this, saw his yard signs. We met up for coffee we like literally met up for coffee. I had dinner with his family 2 days later. I gave my 2 weeks. He moved to Maryland. I started at Backyard Eats full time, and then since have grown into kind of like running the day to day. And now we're partners in business. And he still lives in Maryland, and I'm in Philly.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that is a really unique dynamic and one that I'm curious to learn more about, just like the communications and how you all manage that. But we'll get to that later. I do want to just put a pin in what resonates with me so much, which is the sharing the magic of the backyard garden. I love the word magic, and I'm always incorporating that because it does feel like a miracle when you haven't experienced that before. And Chris was discovering something that he thought was novel. And of course, it's this ancient old thing of collecting and gathering food from, the places that we inhabit. So it sounds like you all do, design, build, maintenance. How did you get started in this world? I read that you studied finance.
Yeah, I studied finance and I worked in an investment bank like right after college in Delaware for 2 years. And my buddy came to me one day he was like biomedical engineering or something. It was like, I'm quitting my job and I'm gonna go travel, right? And by this point, like as I was working in finance, I was also had aspirations to be like a full-time musician. Me and a couple buddies, we had a band going, writing original music, and that was the ultimate goal, like quit the day job and be a musician. So we ended up quitting our jobs, me and two buddies, and traveling the country for like 6 months in just like a sort of like a SUV. We camped like 95% of the nights, and it was kind of like a national park tour slash music tour. We played like bars, farmers markets, maybe like 30 gigs all summer. And I was just sort of thrust into the personal health and I think food scene through that trip completely unintentionally. So I had, two buddies with me. One had like chronic health things going on his whole life. he'd always had like negotiated his diet, and he was gluten free one day and just eating, bananas the next week. And he could never really figure it out, but he was like really connected to what he was eating and how it affected him. So like that personal health lens. And then my buddy on the other side was vegetarian, like sort of spiritually focused vegetarian. So two like wild perspectives on food. And I didn't really have, one way or another, didn't think much of it, I think at the time. So between them being very focused and kind of like food and personal experience, and then in addition to throughout the trip, we just happened to run into these people like living off the land with homesteads and orchards and like farmers markets, and like spent time just inspired by all these awesome people like growing and working in the industry. So for me, it kind of synthesized on that trip. Came home, started a garden, experienced it for myself, and then kind of in short order from there decided I took another job when I got home a couple of years later, decided, hey, I want to go start something, and found Chris. And that job in the interim was really important too, because I took a job as in-home like sales and design for basement waterproofing and foundation repair. It was a full commission kind of like sales and design job. And I'd always been attracted to that entrepreneurial kind of like make your own way, be your own boss type of thing. And that, although it wasn't the subject matter I was passionate about, that framework of like, make your own way, kind of commission sales, was something that I was attracted to, and the freedom of it. But I also learned how, like, what a legitimate in-home contractor, how they're kind of bringing their service to market. So a lot of that I came in with to Backyard Eats, experience from a bigger in-home service company mixed with Chris's, ground up core service of growing and, building these foodscapes.
Yeah, that's a unique and very helpful perspective to have, because I had never like showed up at people's houses, knocked on the door,
Yeah,
and ultimately tried to sell them something.
yeah,
That is a unique experience that a lot of us don't have prior to getting into foodscaping. And ultimately, you could be salesy, but or not, but we're trying to make a sale. We're putting all this effort into the consultation, the design, the proposal, and what keeps the business going and pays for everybody's, salary is the actual installation that we need to hopefully get, yeses on. So
sure.
that is sounds really relevant and just unique that you got to be so close to the land on this tour. What have you developed as your working definition for foodscaping or edible landscaping, or what it is that you do?
Mm. Um, I mean, the way I sort of describe it to people is like, at least to box in like where we are in the landscaping industry, is like we specialize in highlighting like functional plants. So that could be, medicinals, edibles, but a lot of times I'm explaining, hey, we don't mow lawns or do like strictly ornamental gardening, but functional plants is what you can think of as like what we highlight. But really, I think it's just bringing that experience of like connecting people to these functional or useful plants and connecting people to like nature that way. So that's kind of how, in general, I'm explaining it or distinguishing it from like the rest of the industry, I guess.
Yeah, functional plants are quite the unique box within the whole industry, you might say. So, how do you guys educate and empower clients? Because I've seen you all kind of focus on that, and I'm really interested in what you all are doing specifically to bring that to the client.
Yeah, so I think I personally, like, as our services evolved, I'm very like pragmatic, I think, when it comes to the designs and the maintenance, and trying to keep like, things are always so busy when you're developing a product and growing, and I'm trying to keep kind of the main thing in mind, which is like the client's experience, right? Like our mission is to share the magic of homegrown food, and it's really like keeping that client experience in mind and providing that magical experience. And to me, what that is like just removing obstacles for
Mm.
people. So essentially, it's like they're trading us money to like take them to the door of this experience with as little friction as possible. Some people want to know like, hey, can you map out the path to get there so I can walk it alone? Or hey, can I give you this money and you can take me to the good stuff? Um, but a lot of, I think, take like design for instance. A lot of the improvements we've made over the years in design is just like how we know the plants are going to provide a magical experience. Like what's going to ruin it? Like weeds in the pathway, not being able to identify, what's useful plant from weed, or weirdness in opening the gate or building the fence, or all these things. It's like this is only going to take away from the magic of homegrown food. So in the design process, a lot of times it's just iterating the pain points out of the process. And I think on the maintenance side, it's the same thing, but it's also like, people are interested in learning the path there more than like people, I'm sure, would be interested to learn how to build a gate, but they just want it to function properly. Like they called us because they want to learn how to prune a tomato. And some people are more interested than others, but what we've really done over the years is like by perfecting this full service approach, which some clients are very hands off, some are more hands on. But the way I look at it is like, if imagine the client's not hands on at all, and like we have to do the whole thing. We've sort of perfected that and then can kind of like show them the way there. Like if you don't know all the steps, it's hard to like coach somebody on it.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually served us for people that are more DIY to understand like what it takes, from beginning to end. And then we can kind of slot clients into like what they want to learn. And as we build resources for our own team and our own people to perform, say like maintenance, garden care, whatever, planting, we also have those resources we can share with clients.
Yeah, I want to dive more into those resources, but I want to riff on your iterative process that you mentioned because I have found that to be one of the biggest challenges is basically saying we have our systems today, we're rocking and rolling with them. A pain point presents itself, friction as you defined it, and then pivoting and revamping the system is like really hard the more people you have on the team. How do you address that challenge, or what have you found to be successful or just not successful? Any comment?
Yeah. Yeah, I think as you grow, the lack of like processes, documentation, standards, like just rear their ugly head, and variables become time, become pain, probably become inefficiencies from a financial sense. And I found like probably the best way to build it is like institutionalize communication. So I'm a big believer that it's very hard to see an idea and just like recreate an organization that's like delivering something overnight. Like it's the 1,000 little iterations that make somebody super good at what they're doing, or allow like a mature kind of like delivery of product and service in this case. So like for instance, like I want a framework where like if something comes up that pertains to all clients, where we could like iterate something better. Like I need a framework where somebody in the field or like front lines, which a lot of times is not me, is going to notice that and have an automatic kind of sort of like inkling or protocol or instinct to communicate that back to me, to understand like, okay, how can we implement this in our regular process? And I think adjacently, like that has a lot to do with what are your sort of standard operating kind of like instructions to begin with, and then like the vision for where we're going. So people aren't kind of rowing in the same direction. For instance, like they might not know what matters unless they share the vision.
Yeah. Do you all have any kind of meeting sequence that is outside of maybe like a standard weekly meeting that helps that communication and streamlining it?
Yeah, so we have like team meetings Monday mornings, which is essentially like just keeping people in the loop. And a lot of times it's like installs staying after for different like what projects are coming up, doing handoffs, and then we have meetings specific to maintenance, and then like well maybe like trainings here or there. Say like summer plantings coming up, and we have some new people on the team. People need a refresher. That's the other thing about our industry is like stuff happens once a year. So
Right.
it's like if we don't catch it, if I'm not writing a procedure on spring planting this spring, like I'm gonna be out of luck next spring. So we have like special trainings for that stuff, and then sort of more or less technical things between like managers and employees, monthly or quarterly, just like any kind of business might have.
One of the things we hear from pro foodscapers all the time is this need for more community connection and education. And that's why we've created the Foodscaper membership. This is our online forum and learning space just for pro foodscapers. You can share your work, get feedback from me and other professionals, and watch dozens of classes in our training library. It's just $29. First month is free. We would love to see you there. You mentioned spring plantings and summer plantings, and one thing that I find new gardeners really struggle with is the succession aspect of growing, and how to be a really good gardener, you need to really understand timing as well as what you can grow in your climate.
Mm.
You came into this with your finance background, your music. What gave you the confidence to run this gardening company? Because a lot of people are like super jazzed about making this their living, and they contact us at the Foodscaper and they're like, I don't have that much experience growing. How do I get into this? Because I'm super passionate. I'm ready to hit the ground running, but I don't have like 10 years experience gardening.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I was sort of at an advantage of like Chris did the initial Master Gardener program, or like and I think he actually did the Nicole Burke's coaching course. And
Yes.
so he had like a core understanding of growing, and he was able to hire like I was the third employee. Like one of the other two was actually like a proficient vegetable gardener. So in a way, I was just coming in learning sort of and I wouldn't say we're like super like botany or horticulture focused. We have people on staff that know what they're doing, but mainly like what we're doing is like working a system. So like if we know when to put these lettuces in, like, I don't know what the botanical difference is between an iceberg lettuce and a romaine. I know that they get planted generally the same week, and they generally last the same amount of time. So like my job was to systematize that kind of stuff, and I almost rely on other people in the industry or like in the company to tell me what aphids are doing, or what certain starts are lacking, or this and that. And I think like my strong suit is packaging that into something that's like a realistic to deliver to a client, at not in just two sites, across dozens of gardens. So, but I do think like now looking back on it, I think people in the early going, there's so much information out there, right? Like a lot of what foodscapers are doing are just like picking a lane and like taking people down the path. And I think it's so overwhelming. Like I don't know how many times I've come out to gardens, and people, not even just people trying to get into the business, customers like, I don't know what's wrong. I've been grinding up eggshells and like doing that. And it's like, well, you got to start with like, you're just kind of like digging a tomato into grass and putting eggshells on it. Like, let's start with some infrastructure. Let's start with some good soil. And it's like, if you have those kind of things, like 9 times out of 10, you probably won't have to like add some very specific amendment or be, some plant botanist if you have a good system. So I guess, long story short, in terms of people getting into the business, is that like I think focusing more holistic on like how to set up systems where many things can thrive, and then figuring out what a cucumber beetle is like when it comes up. But like you got to start
Yeah.
somewhere and iterate from there.
Yeah. I resonate with a lot of that. And I also think it's been an experiment for me in just humbly saying, like, I don't know sometimes, and I'm gonna research that, get back to you. I'm gonna talk to the other people on my team who know about that, get back to you, and just be honest, that we don't know everything.
Yeah.
Uh, you mentioned you all are servicing like dozens of gardens. I didn't catch at the beginning, how big is your team?
So we're a team of 10.
Fantastic.
Yeah, sometimes we do summer type of help. We'll go up to like 12 or 13, but team of 10, like core people. We spring planted about 140 gardens this year, spring
Wow.
and summer plant. Yes, that's kind of the idea of our client size.
Is your revenue 50-50 install maintenance? What's that divide look like for you?
Still a lot of install. And the dream, I think, is to like get more, I mean, just recurring clients we're working with all the time. We're not having to, install revenue takes a lot of effort, even though they're big ticket kind of items. But we're always like, we started at like 2/3 install, 1/3 maintenance, and we're like
Yep.
slowly creeping to
That's
50
great.
50, but like slowly.
It's hard. It's hard,
Yeah.
but so worth it to have that base.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest, like, retention of maintenance clients is one of the biggest pride points for us. Cause like these people have worked with us over
Yeah.
5, 10, 20 different contacts and like are really into our service. And to have somebody stay from year to year is really awesome.
Yeah, it feels like such a win. I commend you for keeping that big book of business going. When somebody approaches you for a new install and they say, "Hey, Mike, what's this new garden going to cost me? I want, like 5 raised beds and we've got deer."
Yeah.
Like, how do you approach like questions like that? Do you generally just kind of throw them a number? Or
Yeah. So we've sort of developed one, it's a really hard question to answer. And like when somebody calls, it's very typical. Hey, what's this like gonna cost? And I think like we're comfortable giving like a starting at, because like in our climate, you need a fence. If you got a deer or groundhogs, probably like you're gonna need a 6 foot fence. You're gonna need probably pathways inside the raised beds, and we're always recommending irrigation. So like even like a little tiny pocket space that's 8 by 8, 10 by 10 for a complete system up to our standards, we're telling people, hey, this is probably going to be 9,500 and above. Because what happens is like it's hard to give somebody half of a garden when there's deer around. Or like if you want to give them irrigation or something that's going to actually like work and be lower maintenance. So very rarely, like unless there's a city backyard, a roof or something, or somebody has like a stellar yard fence, like I would say there's maybe 5% of our projects don't include some sort of serious pest protection and like, aren't just raised beds and soil.
wow. Yeah, that's a unique thing of yours, it seems, compared to other locations where the need for fencing is so high, and I'm sure you all are really good at building fencing at this point. One other thing that I noticed you all are really good about, speaking of just like the whole client experience, is these metal labels with QR codes, and people
Yeah.
can go see that on your website. But talk me through these cute and very professionally done metal labels with QR codes that I see you putting in gardens.
Yeah, so Chris is like me, maybe even more so than me, is like a tech nerd. He's
Okay.
like always on top of it, and I'm not like a stranger to it, but he really like kind of gets him going, like tech and automation and new things. And this was something I think he saw like a grocery store. It was like scan this code and maybe like link to like the farm these apples were from or something. And he just had that idea, and I think like we're always looking for ways to educate people. Like one of the biggest questions we get is like, how do I harvest this? When do I harvest this?
Yes.
And you can't like put all the information physically in a garden. So that was just a great, we always had labels. Um, and that was just a great way to synthesize. Like if somebody's willing to have their phone out in the garden, scan a label, it takes you to a page that tells you like how and when you might harvest these things, ideas for using things, which is a whole nother, how do you translate this to the kitchen and actually use what you're harvesting? That's a big piece of intimidation, even for people that have these, fully functioning spaces. Yeah, so that was just a really unique way, I think, good idea to
Yeah.
use tech.
Yeah. It is. It really professionalizes your look. And I think it, for a certain audience, is really appealing. I want to I want to try to get away from, that the nitty-gritty for a second and just hear a little bit about any early clients that you've had that have kind of shaped this business model as it's grown, or just any good touchy-feely stories from those clients that you've had for like years now, you mentioned,
Uh,
and that are kind of like, Betsy, that's like our go-to client, and
yeah.
really help you develop what you've grown into.
Um, so like one in particular, well, you got to commend these early clients because they had to show us a lot of grace.
Yes.
Like, I don't know what our most dramatic failures were, but I'm sure they were many, and allowed us to essentially, like, they were knowingly like allowing us to experiment the service in their garden just because they believed in it. And I think it's like kind of the power of the mission is they believed in it and they wanted us to figure it out, and they were able to show us some grace, so we weren't perfect at first delivering the service. But those people that I think were willing to take that ride also were willing to take questions and give feedback to me. So like I'll go to those people, hey, so and so, what do you think about these new QR code labels? Are you using them? Any pain points? Like to be able to have an open dialogue like that with clients that like know your whole story and your whole service is super invaluable. And one of the things I think is hard to do, just to like, it's easy to make decisions for the client experience without actually talking to the client. I mean, it's hard to like talk and sit down with people, take their time. But at the end of the day, like that's where the good ideas come from, I think, is like talking to the people using them.
Yeah, that's so huge to have somebody you can get some honest feedback from. And one thing we've always tried to do is nurture those relationships, send flowers, send a
Yeah.
basket of chestnuts in the fall,
Yeah.
really show them how much we appreciate them because they're worth their weight in gold, right?
And honestly, people come to mind too when we talk about this that are like tough clients, like where people, um, I've had like clients that were fellow business owners and just like didn't take much riffraff, like, needed to understand stuff better or like kind of knew, I don't know, knew like the game or like what we were dealing with too. So like weren't afraid to like press me. And passionate conversations, sometimes back and forth, have resulted in like really good changes. People that were just tough on us.
Yeah, tough love. Tough love helps us grow.
It does.
Taking a quick break to remind you about our monthly Pro Talks. These are free, live, continuing education classes taught by some of the most inspiring ecological, edible landscapers in the business. These Pro Talks give you foodscaper education that you truly can't find anywhere else. So join us each month. If you're a member, you'll also get the recording. Enroll in the next Pro Talk at foodscaper.com/Pro Talks. You mentioned how so many of your gardens have fencing. Walk us through any other like design principles or philosophies that you find you're kind of clicking the repeat button on because you've done so many of them now that it's just working, and you can rally an install team around them because they get it and the client likes it because of its X, Y, and Z reason.
Yeah, and this is a good example of like takes so many iterations to get to something like this. And the way I kind of explain it to clients, because a lot of our designs end up kind of similar, different shapes and sizes of something similar. I'd say like half our projects take on this like U-shape, G-shape perimeter type of bed look. And the logic there is like, all right, you need a 5 to 6 foot fence. So you're going to have to walk in your space. And so we're probably dealing with some level of like finite rectangle or square to build within. And the best way to like use that space for square footage of growing is typically, the perimeter with like a shared path in the middle. Not everybody likes that aesthetic, but like functionally, it's kind of smart design, I think. And then if you get big enough, you can add elements in the middle or different beds or whatever. But we found like that principle mixed with like, a big thing for us was like figuring out how to integrate the fence in line with the beds. So now we have perimeter beds with a fence on it, and we can make that in different shapes and sizes. So that's kind of how I explain it to people is like, hey, you need a walk-in space. Let's use it efficiently and like eliminate weird spaces. Like everybody knows like the classic, like there's a bed and then a fence like 2 inches away from it, and it's just like a weed highway.
Mhm.
Like that's something like eliminating those kind of spaces that would just ruin people's experience.
Yeah, and it seems like you're really building fences onto the beds as opposed to building fences around the beds.
Mhm.
Wondering if you could say anything about that.
Yeah, so we are like utilizing for a lot of those designs, we're utilizing the bed structure as kind of like the impetus for like the foundation for the fence. Um, and it doesn't have to be like, wood kind of framed and all. Like we're doing it kind of up, kind of nice and sturdy. But even if you had like beds where you just did it on the perimeter, you could put a green stake garden fence in there without having to put it in the yard or whatever. Yeah, so it's just using the structure that's already there to build the high fence versus like when we have to do fences off the bed, you're putting posts in the ground, you're building your own framework.
Sure. How did you all decide to use the hardware that I'm seeing to build all those fences and all of your bed corners? Because that seems like a really unique choice that you all are making. And I'd love to learn if there was like a backstory behind that. And
Yeah, I mean, I think we've Chris is kind of was using that in the beginning, like those metal corners, and I kind of just ran with it. And once we discovered how to use those posts, like the gaps in the corners, originally it was for just like trellising, like a wall trellis on one side of like a 4x8, and then we kind of translated that to like how do we build a fence out of these, and you know so it like makes life a lot easier to use them in a lot of ways, but also like the flip side is like when you're using a lot of hardware, a lot of metal pieces, a lot of corners, it gets expensive, ultimately for the client. So we've sort of, our story is one of like, let's make this as high quality as possible, as high quality as possible. But then you got to watch out for like, but people have to afford this, like, so, I mean, you could get all sorts of nice stuff all the time. We had to like stop somewhere. Those corners just became like an integral part of our, kind of designs we lean towards. Um, so that's kind of why we just stuck with them over the years.
yeah, the other unique thing about them is just how they must provide more rot resistance in the corners. Um, do you all use any corner blocking in the corner as well, like wood, or is it just the metal frame and the 2 inch lumber that looks like it goes in there?
Yeah, it's the frame and the lumber. Um, and they're definitely like, I'm sure, depending on the kind of screws you use, if you kind of go wood to wood, it's really any system's right as good as its useful life, or like its weakest link rather. So if you're using some nice wood and a crappy screw, like it comes two great pieces of wood come apart. Yeah, your bed's broken. So it is a longevity thing too, I think.
Have you had to do any repair and stuff over the years that you could share any stories or lessons learned there?
It's really interesting because, I've been doing this for 5 years. And, the company's been around for a little more than that. So there's older gardens now that are like aging. And I wouldn't say any are at the point of like full on, we gotta like rebuild you, but it might be like this side's a little wet and this one board is getting weird and like kind of fungally. And I'm starting to think about that just very recently. Like this season, I've been seeing some of that where it's like, okay, we have to replace like this one side of this one bed. How are we going to do that without like taking apart the whole garden? So it's a new problem, I would say, over like the first year or two, just like maintaining long term these spaces, which, God willing, stay in this long enough, you might be doing a second garden for somebody on the same site, but for now it's just kind of like a board here, a board there. How do we do this
Yeah.
cost effectively, without rebuilding the whole garden? So I don't have any great insight. I'll get
Well,
back
let us know what you
to
discovered. Yeah. That's going to be an issue that I'm sure a lot of us face over the years as the industry grows, is just pulling out that 1 week link, and how do we shimmy something new in there? How do we charge for that? Do we charge for it? And it all goes back to this really challenging question that we get all the time, which is, how long's my garden going to last, Mike? You're
that.
building this out of wood.
Well, I always like think about like I think screws are a good example where it's just like it's something subtle in a way that's like it's so easy for like somebody orders the wrong screw. All of a sudden we're using a screw that only lasts like a year. It's like my biggest fear. It's like we build all these gardens with like crappy screws that all give way and 2 years and gardens start falling apart. I mean, that's not reality. It's not it's not happening. But in terms of longevity, I think like the other hard part is making decisions where, on like wood, say, it's like this wood's supposed to last X amount of years. Well, like I don't actually know that until X amount of years. And we're going to really start finding that stuff out, I think, in real time. But, it seems trending that we're in the right direction. I tell people like, depending on the wood type, like 10 to 15 years before you need to like replace it all. There could be a board here, a board there, and you might end up with a decent amount of replacement before that time. But total life of the structure, using expensive parts and wood coatings and things.
Hey friends, we are wrapping up the first portion of our interview here, but you can listen to the full episode inside the Foodscaper membership. Members get access to the complete episode, our full library of training videos, and a community forum where you can get feedback on your work and make professional connections as you build your edible landscaping career. Get that first month free at thefoodscaper.com/membership. And thank you so much for listening. Keep growing.